Does China want India to be junior partner? Sreeram Chaulia, does China want India to be a junior partner in this relationship? Follow China, follow their instructions, their orders, and not have an independent policy the way we may want to be, because we see ourselves as a big power ourselves.
That's right, Gaurav. Our ambition is to be their equals eventually. But of course, there is a huge asymmetry and a power gap, and we do respect that fact. And I think the difference in power is also reflecting in the difference in strategies. I mean, we tend to be a little more defensive because we are trying to protect our turf against further encroachments by the Chinese. On the other hand, the Belt and Road and all these, they are on a going out mission, and increasingly they are pushing further and further into our domain, and I think that's the point. I think informal summit at Wuhan will help, Gaurav, because I feel like, you know, in a candid setting where there is no public opinion or news media and just the two leaders, I think Prime Minister Modi can frankly ask, why are you doing this and why can't you allay our concerns? You always demand that we should respect one China policy. We have said one India policy, and it doesn't seem like you're really, you know, fully respecting that. I think he's been very forthright in the past as well, in previous summits with Xi Jinping, and I think he can say it. Although the Chinese sense that we are somehow vulnerable, there's all this talk about Prime Minister Modi going for elections and he wants to avoid Doklam too, and that's why, you know, is a sign of weakness and we are afraid of them. But I don't think so. I think we can put our best foot forward while respecting the power asymmetry.
Let's see if there's a big political fight on it, but let me get our guests to react on this, and one by one. Yes. Professor Chaulia?
I think, Gaurav, you know, people have made all kinds of comments about the Prime Minister's foreign policy, but one thing is for sure, he is not going to sell out India's national interests, and I think it's very unfair to say that this is a no-agenda summit. I think we are going in with preparations ourselves. And secondly, what you need to see is the larger picture. You know, there are people, the same person who is now critiquing the Prime Minister once said, this is Doklam, and saying that, you know, somehow the Prime Minister hiding something from the nation, when actually he showed strategic resolve and stood firm last year. And the Chinese were compelled to withdraw to some extent, although the power asymmetry is such that we cannot fully have our cake and eat it too. So similarly, there are political forces in this country who have said things like, where is the proof of surgical strikes, or that it is just a repetition of what has happened in the past. This is all, you know, I think punching below the belt, and rather than showing national unity at this time, there's just a last line that Mr. Gandhi is saying where we support you, but otherwise it's taking a pot shot which is not going to help us. The Chinese are going to love this to show, you know, India is this chaotic democracy, they have no national interest and national consensus, and they're going to try and divide us. I think it's a wrong strategy. Gaurav, I just want to add, you know, we have identified 23 so-called sensitive points along the long 4,000-kilometer long LAC after Doklam, and we are reinforcing ourselves militarily because, you know, the charm offensive the Chinese put out cannot be taken for granted, you know. And I think Modi is preparing in a way where we have a diplomatic opening, and we must keep on trying on that front, but simultaneously fortify our defenses, because other than that, there is no guarantee of the Chinese going back on a lot of their commitments and promises. We've seen this umpteen times. So they're not very reliable, they're very strategic, and you can, to use the word, you know, plainly cunning. So when you have to deal with that kind of an adversary slash cooperative partner, we have to play it both ways, and I think that's the real strategy behind this.
Here in our studios, we're joined by Dr. Sreeram Chaulia. He's Dean at the General School of International Affairs. You know, I said this in the previous hour as well. This is uncharted territory. Oh, by the way, we're also joined by Saurav Shukla, editor-in-chief of newsmobile.in, and Pinak Chakravarti, former diplomat. I said this, Dr. Chaulia, in the previous hour. We are in uncharted territory. We've not had an informal summit between India and China, the heads of the two countries. What are we to expect? How do we judge what will come out of this meeting?
Zaka, I think the trust building is, I think you know, we need to underline that, because, you know, specifics, surely they're going to, because there are 6 meetings over 24 hours, this very intensive engagement, and I'm pretty sure we'll have some kind of concrete outcomes which we'll see in the form of altered behavior or readjustment of the foreign policies and strategies of both countries in the coming months. 15 years is a long horizon they're talking about, but that's typically the Chinese way to look at it, and they often talk in terms of longer, you know, time spans. But I think one thing is clear, that they are looking at, you know, some kind of an accommodative understanding to avoid, you know, brinkmanship, which we have seen last year during Doklam, and I think they are looking at how we can moderate and regulate the tussle. I don't think they're denying it. You know, we should not fall for the Chinese rhetoric, the media, which is saying, you know, it's all going to be, you know, milk and honey, and we are now moving in a new direction, a new era, and a new chapter. I think that is hyperbole. We need to be realistic as to what can be achieved from this. But certainly, high-level engagement of this sort is necessary in order to try and overcome the, for example, the military to military, the eyeball to eyeball, and also the broader Indian Ocean strategy where there is a geopolitical competition. What is the role of United States? Because the Chinese continue to insist that the United States is using India to try and contain them. So Prime Minister may probably offer some assurances that we are actually an independent power and think for ourselves and that we are not somebody's junior partner. So there are a whole range of geopolitical, economic issues. There's probably some concrete takeaways as well which will come.
But in terms of, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of chatter, and I'm sure you've picked up some of this as well, about some kind of a grand bargain. We know that Belt and Road is a very personal initiative for Xi Jinping. They've been wanting India to join Belt and Road for a long time now. India has its own genuine concerns about CPEC, which is part of Belt and Road. Do you believe it's possible that some kind of quid pro quo can be achieved?
Well, Zaka, I think we have joined some Chinese initiatives in the past, like Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. But Belt and Road, I think, for them to completely abandon Pakistan or to dissociate the CPEC from Belt and Road and say now it's a separate initiative or something, I don't think it's going to be enough for us because...
Let's say, for example, if they, instead of calling it CPEC, they call it the China-South Asia corridor.
Well, that's even more threatening because that will mean that, you know, they are consolidating their encirclement of, you know, the string of pearls as we believe it, you know. So I think what is likely to happen, my view is, you know, they will say that we will increase investments in your country, and which we have been wanting. You know, if they can invest $60 billion in a trouble-torn and terrorist, riven country like Pakistan, and the peanuts they give us in terms of foreign investment, that's something I think Prime Minister wants, because one is the trade deficit, but it can be offset by far greater Chinese investment in the country, which is not even $5 billion.
But don't call it or don't associate it as part of
Belt and Road.
BRI.
See, because Belt and Road, I think, is a red line for us, because we don't want to be a junior partner in a unilateral Chinese-led initiative that will increase their influence.
Let me ask, Professor Chaulia, you know, obviously, if you're seeing this for the first time, it's easy to fall for the pomp and show and ceremony and the red carpet that the Chinese roll out. But ultimately, it's clear. I mean, they want India to be on board BRI. And from the information that we're picking up from top government sources, people who are part of this team that is going into Wuhan, India's position is clear. We're not going to be part of OBOR as it has been laid out as of now.
That's right, Zaka. I think that China is a very strategic player, you know, and they prepare very well for these kind of high-profile summits, and they have, you know, negotiating lines and positions and how much to give, how not to. They're actually very pragmatic too. So one should not really, you know, fall for all the talk about how we can cooperate and be brothers and, you know, fraternity and all that, which usually shrouds far shrewder agenda. And I think, you know, for example, on Nepal, on Maldives, on all our core interests, they often say that why can't we have trilateral cooperation where, you know, this small South Asian country, China as well as India work together for economic growth and for infrastructure building. We have no ulterior motive, as, you know, Maha is saying. That's typically their line, you know, and they often ask us, why are you so suspicious? But I think beneath that, we have seen it and we have learned it in the past, you know, through hard lessons, 1962, the bye-bye thing really didn't work. You know?
No, but hang on. Here's the problem. The problem is that countries like Nepal and Maldives are already on board One Belt, One Road.
Yeah, but we are
right?
we're
I
trying
mean, it's not like they're also resisting it. They're already on board.
We're trying to claw our way back.
So my point is that when the Chinese argue that, look, if you are staying out of this multilateral initiative, the multilateral engagement, then it's your loss as much as it is, you know, the way you pitched it.
Sure,
so,
we cannot compete with them on checkbook diplomacy.
Of course.
There's no question. But I think we have, you know, made a strong point about enhancing our aid to key countries. For example, Nepal. This year, there's a 75% increase in Indian foreign aid to Nepal. Similarly, we are working on Bhutan, you know, and where we feel like we are critically being encroached upon. I think the difference in the two sides really at Wuhan is the Chinese feel in an aggressive mood because they're expanding, they've got the money, they are, you know, pushing outwards. India, on the other hand, we feel defensive because we're trying to protect our turf and keep our sphere of influence. And there, I think, as we have said, you know, the government sources you're mentioning are saying no territorial compromise, because we know that we are a little bit on the defensive on this matter. So I think it's important for us.
You know, he's trying to send out a signal to America that, look, you think that we don't have any friends and allies. You think all our, you know, neighbors have problems with us. But the fact is that we're able to look past these. So don't think that we're out on our own. And from India's point of view, this is great because you're being quoted by both China and the US at the same time.
Yeah, Zaka, I think the certainty and the uncertainty, the factor that Pramit just mentioned, is quite critical because the Chinese have juxtaposed the Wuhan summit with what they call, braggadocio and, aggression by Trump. And they've clearly said that, this should send a signal to Washington. And I think he's right on that. But you see, Trump has not really properly contained China with a proper alliance system in Asia, the way Obama was trying to do through pivot to Asia.
Yeah.
So the Chinese have wiggle room. So on one hand, they are sending a signal to the Americans saying, look, we have friends and we can cooperate. But on the other hand, they know that they are not fully encircled yet. And Trump is doing unilateral trade war and trying to extract concessions, but he's not able to build or maintain that old alliance system because of his America first and his narrow economic nationalism.
Okay.
So I think it's a complex scenario, and I think the American factor is going to come in this discussion for sure, because she is going to definitely ask, are you in a formal alliance with the US? Are you going to work with them to try and contain us? Why can't we cooperate and create what they call an Asia-Pacific system? They're not even using Indo-Pacific, which we want and which the Americans use, because they want to create an Asia-Pacific Sino-centric order by pushing out the Americans as much as possible. And they think they can try and wean India towards their side at least a little bit and, push the Americans out. But I don't think Modi is going to give in on that.
One of the phrases that Xi Jinping used in response to this so-called pivot to Asia was Asia for Asians, meaning there's no place for outside powers in Asia.
China will...
How does India then respond, Dr. Chaulia, if India is saying that, look, the Indian Ocean region is our sphere of influence, this is our core concern, this is our red line, you can't cross this, and China is saying that, look, Indian Ocean, it doesn't necessarily mean India's ocean, we are also going to be part of it, and smaller countries in the Indian Ocean region are going with the Chinese, then what do we do?
Zaka, we always have to do tit for tat in geostrategic competition. So we are trying to strengthen our ties with key countries in ASEAN. Japan, Prime Minister Modi has invested a lot in Shinzo Abe and in advancing that relationship in order to show that, if you come into our backyard and essentially challenge our supremacy here, we can also try and do that. But there is
what about the points that Pramit made?
But
Maldives and Sri Lanka.
There is an asymmetry because we don't have the same kind of resources that the Chinese have, right? So this is an unequal fight, let's put it this way. It's not a fair competition. They are 4 times, 5 times larger than us in all parameters, military, economic. So therefore, the United States becomes...
Okay, can I just...